Hello and welcome to the Organic Beehive. I am an aspiring homesteader in the suburbs, just sharing my journey with you all. And in today's video, I am going to share with you how I make a calcium supplementation for my chickens. Now you might be wondering why calcium supplementation is so important for your chickens. There are three things that calcium will help in your chickens. Number one, it helps give those eggs that hard shell. It helps prevent bone damage, and it also helps strengthen their blood vessels. Now, calcium supplementation is very important for your chickens. And if they are lacking in calcium, you are going to see some signs arise in their health. And one of those could be a soft eggshell. Once you touch a soft egg, you'll know exactly what it is, and that is a big sign that your chickens need that added calcium. It also, they can suffer from bone damage. They can suffer from behavior issues. Maybe a chicken that wasn't normally, fighting others is now all of a sudden. That could be a sign. If your chickens are decreasing their egg production or even stopping their egg production, that could be another sign. Now, a little side note with that, there are natural reasons that your chickens would decrease their egg production. So if your chickens are molting and it's the winter and there is not as much sunlight as they need for laying eggs, they are naturally going to decrease their egg production. But aside from that, if you've eliminated those two things and they are still not laying as much as they're used to, calcium, a lack of calcium could be an issue. And the last thing is it could cause lameness or stiff legs in your chicken as well. Now, calcium supplementation is not something that you would feed for every chicken. You would not feed calcium to, let's say, chicks, pullets, roosters, or hens that are of old age that are no longer laying eggs. These are calcium is strictly for chickens that are in their laying years. Now, you might want to start supplementing calcium right before they start laying. So you could start supplementing around, I would say 18 weeks at the earliest. If you follow a lot of homesteaders, I don't know, I feel like there's a westernized way of homesteading that is being pushed, and although it works fine, for me, I went into homesteading just to be a little more self-reliant. And if I am relying on a big box store for my calcium supplementation, among other things, I don't know, it just doesn't seem worth it to me. So we got chickens a couple years ago, and we've just been kind of on this journey of wondering, is it worth it? Right? In fact, right now I'm kind of like plugging the numbers in, seeing how much they produce, how much we might even be selling, and then, how much we are paying on feed and stuff every month. And I think with the westernized way of homesteading, those bills tend to be higher than, what we may be getting out of it, and it might not be worth it. But I've kind of been challenging myself to find ways that I can still provide for the chickens and my homestead, and where I'm not relying on the stores as much. So today with the calcium supplementation, you're going to hear a lot of people say that you need to give your chickens oyster shells when they start laying, and that is your calcium supplementation. Now, I am a health person. I love oyster shells. It is one of the most nutrient-dense food sources. But the chickens, they benefit from oysters as well, specifically the oyster shells. Now, if you want to save yourself money from having to go out and constantly purchase oyster shells for your chickens' calcium, you could possibly make your own oyster shells for your chickens. Now, this obviously only pertains to those of you that live on the beach. To that, I am jealous. But if you live by the beach on the coast and you have access to oyster shells, go ahead and grab yourself some and then get home, wash them off, bake them in the oven for about 10 minutes at 250 degrees. Remember, you're just drying them out. And then you would put them in a Ziploc bag and you can smash them up with a hammer and feed them to your chickens. That is a wonderful, wonderful option. Again, that only works for those of us who live by the beach. I do not live by the beach. And if you're in the States, a majority of you don't live on the beach either. So the alternative that I would like to share with you today are something that you already have that your chickens are producing, and that is eggshells. Eggshells are a great source of calcium. Now, how you prepare your eggshells is very similar to how you would do oyster shells. So after I make a normal breakfast for the morning, which is usually eggs because eggs is what we have all the time, it became especially useful for me this week because we didn't go grocery shopping this weekend. And so it's been a fun challenge to kind of clean out our fridge and our freezer and our pantry. But also it's great to know that I can always rely on eggs from the chickens. Again, that's whole self-reliance thing. The more you start producing, the more it's just like, I don't know, it's so rewarding. It can be an addiction, but you gotta be careful. But anyhow, I have eggshells from the chickens and we've been making eggs for breakfast this week. So I will take the eggshells, any eggshell that I use, I will rinse it off just as I would an oyster shell. And then I don't necessarily bake them off. I will let them air dry on the counter. So I actually have a bowl sitting out on my counter. I don't know, aesthetically, I still think it looks nice because there's a rainbow of colors. We've got green, blue, and brown eggs. So I don't know, it doesn't really bother me. Maybe it bothers you. You can put it in the pantry. Either way, you want to dry them out. So I have a bowl, and after I rinse them, I dry them out. It takes about a day for them to air dry, and then the next morning I crush them up, and then I might put more in there. Now, some people will overcomplicate this process, and if you're like me, you want to work smarter, not harder. So you can also take your eggshells and you can bake them off as you would an oyster shell. So, you know, if you find yourself baking bread or something or dinner in the oven, while it's on, you might as well throw some eggshells in there. So you can put it in a single layer on a baking sheet and bake it in the oven, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. We don't necessarily have to overcomplicate it. You're just drying it out because when it is dry, it's easier to crush. So You would just dry them out. You could probably put them in the oven anywhere between 200 and 400 degrees. Again, there's not an exact science. You're just drying them out. And once they're dried out, you're going to crush them. Many different ways you can crush them. You can crush them by hand, which I like to do because it requires less dishes. You can crush them with a potato masher, and you can also crush them, let's see, what's the other? Oh, a mortar and pestle. I mean, I suppose you can use a food processor, a blender, any of that works just fine. The reason you want to crush them is it is believed that if you don't crush them, right, you just crack them and you give them the eggshell like that, that it would promote them to eat their own eggs. And obviously that defeats the purpose. We want to be able to use their eggs. So if that is a concern to you, I don't know if it's a concern for me, but an extra step like just crushing it, which takes 30 seconds, maybe not even, I'm willing to do that. But you can always experiment with your own chickens, see what happens. But I don't know, I guess the extra work it takes to just crush the eggs and to not promote them eating their own is worth it to me. But again, do your own research, you can do your own experiments, and you know what? Let us know in the comments what you do. Do you get away with just cracking it and giving it to them, or do you crush them? Either way, you would feed the eggshells to your chickens. Now, as far as how often you feed it to them is also up to you. I've done both ways. So one thing you can do is in a separate bowl from like their regular feed, you would let them have the eggshells, you know, like about once a week. Maybe you do two, but you definitely don't want to overdo eggshells. Chickens should, I mean, they know their bodies pretty well, so they're gonna know what they need, and they'll gravitate to the eggshells if they need it. But I mean, if you offer it to them once a week, that's perfectly fine. And then also, you know, I've also done it where I have a bowl in their coop of constant access to eggshells, and whenever it runs out, I will give them more. Now, we have had a rat issue recently, and I haven't done the research on this. I don't know if eggshells are something that they would use or not, but I just don't want to take the risk. So instead of keeping the eggshells in the coop for them to have free reign, I usually just put it in the bowl once a week, give it to them throughout the day, and then at the end of the day, I'll take the bowl, and whatever they don't use, I'll keep for another day. Now, these eggshells, they are great not only for your chickens as a calcium supplement, but you can use them as well if you're looking to add calcium in your diet. I haven't personally done this. I feel like I'm getting enough calcium through the raw milk and the dairy products that I have on a regular basis. But if maybe you are a little intolerant to dairy, then the eggshells could be a great alternative for you. Instead of, I mean, obviously taking the smashed eggshells might not be too appetizing for you. You could definitely take those eggshells and add it to a food processor, or even like I have a coffee grinder. We actually, my husband's a little picky with coffee, so he actually doesn't use this specific coffee grinder for coffee. We would grind the coffee beans in it, and he would get so many different textures. It wasn't all uniform, which he really prefers. He's a chef, so I mean, he's pretty picky with that stuff, and I don't blame him. So we use it now for like spices, and it's also great to turn the eggshells into a powder. So if you do that, you can, add that to, I don't know, a yogurt or something, a drink, and take your calcium that way. That's a great thing for you to take as well for your calcium supplementation. Another way that you can use eggshells around the home would also be compost. I personally would process it into a fine powder because I find even crushed eggshells in my compost don't break down as fast as a lot of the other things. I mean, it wouldn't hurt your garden, but I don't know. It's a personal preference. I would probably do it in if I didn't have the chickens to feed the eggshells to, I would probably use it in my compost and process it into a finer powder. That's just a side note. And another way that you can use your eggshells is if you crack it in half, use both halves to house 2 seedlings. I think it's great. You don't have to go out and buy all the supplies that they tell you that you need for seed starting. If you are just starting off and you're just not sure if this is going to be a hobby of yours, you're just testing the waters, you don't want the initial investment to start off with, eggshells would be great to use for starting your seedlings for a future garden. And the great thing about it is it will decompose and you won't have to take the seedling out and disturb the roots. You could just put it directly into the ground, and that is a great option. And then the last thing you can do with your eggshells is, again, process it into a fine powder and give it to your tomatoes. If you're growing tomatoes and your tomatoes need a extra calcium boost, they suffer through what is called bottom rot. So the tomato will look really great and, red and whatever. And then you notice the bottom of it is kind of rotting out. That is called bottom rot. And you can essentially prevent that with the calcium. And your eggshells would be great for that as well, to just kind of decompose in the dirt next to your tomato plants. And also, along with your, eggshells to give to the chickens, you could also use food scraps that have added calcium to it. So just Google or do a nutritional calculator for any sort of food scrap that you have in your fridge that you don't want to necessarily throw away. Some of that stuff is really high in calcium. Spinach, kale, milk, yogurt, cabbage, salmon, what else is there? Summer squash. These are all great things that have extra calcium in them and would be great for your chickens as well, and won't send you running to the nearest big box store to buy more oyster shells. Right? Like, I am here to just, not only am I doing this to help me save money, but it is so easy for you to do as well. And if you are struggling in today's financial climate, I totally understand. And I just hope that this tip is useful. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you did find it useful, go ahead and give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe. In the future, let me know in the comments if this is something you would be interested in, but I am gonna share a few ways that I save money on my feed bill for my chickens. Because again, if my feed bill over exceeds what they're producing for me, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for anybody. I mean, I don't know. My husband might disagree because he likes the health benefits and the quality of it, which I do agree, but I'm a frugal girl and I want to make sure I at least even out. So anyways, if that is something you'd be interested, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.